especially with OP14 and EB04 right around the corner, releasing in about a month, less than a month now. We've already started to see out in the East that the OP14 decks definitely changed the format. I'll go over my OP14 tier list later, but with the introduction of new decks, new archetypes, and new play styles means that some cards that we've had previously in other sets become more meta relevant, right? If you want to play these certain decks, you're going to want to make sure that you have these cards. I've got a whole sheet right here of basically a diagram of different cards that I've been seeing in the Eastern OP14 format, and even some introductory Western OP14 and EB04 lists, like stuff from the Chinos Cup, to where if you want to get a little bit ahead and make sure that you have these cards, you can go ahead and check them off your list. The holidays have officially hit at Nen Garden, and they're following up their Black Friday with a huge sale continuing. If you go ahead right now and buy any 2 playmats on their website, you can get them combined for just $60, which is basically a steal when we're talking about playmats, right? So not only do you get these incredible deals, but my affiliate code actually stacks on top of it to save you even more money this holiday season. Spread the holiday cheer by using code Atrocious at checkout for 10% off your order on these already great deals. The link to Nen Garden's website will be in the description below, and thank you so much for supporting one of our great friends here in the community. Happy holidays to you, and let's get back into the video. So starting off, I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, Boa Hancock. Boa is definitely a top contender within the meta, and is going to be a strong one that if you want to play a good deck, you could play Boa. I think personally that you have to get Kumas for the deck. Now, I know Secret Rare Kuma and especially also Starter Deck 17 4-cost blocker Boa have already increased in price. But I think honestly, like, it's gonna go higher, especially once the set actually releases. So although I recommend buying it now, you should buy it if you want to play it. Don't buy it just to have it, really, unless you want to make sure you have it in your back pocket for like another format or an upcoming deck that has it that maybe isn't Boa. But speaking of other Boa cards, there are other Boa cards that are relatively inexpensive that I think also are very good for that deck that you're going to want to grab and may see slight increases. We're talking more like $1, $2 per card at most, and that adds up over time when you're playing card games. Some of the other cards that I got for the Boa Hancock deck is Hiyori. The Hiyori from OP06 thankfully had a reprint in PRB. I think it's just generally a good card, even though it's not necessarily searchable in the deck. Just being able to manipulate the top of your life. We've seen players manipulate the Gorgon sisters as their first life, a Marguerite searcher, a Ran. Even though Boa's already a trigger heavy deck, it gives a little bit more flexibility in that spot. I've also got Sengoku. Now, I personally think Sengoku, the searcher from OP07, is the best way to play Boa, right? We've seen it in a couple different championships now. Sengoku has the ability to find all of your different Boa Hancock labeled cards, like the 4-drop blocker, like the 9-drop boss monster, and also different cards like Perfume Femur. Perfume Femur also on my list of cards that you want to make sure to get. But I'll get to that in a second because there's another deck that also utilizes it. Sengoku can just enable so many different things within the deck, especially since Boa is partially blue and 7 Warlords of the Sea has traditionally been blue. It enables you to use older cards like Sables, right, that we saw in the last Japan Championships. Sables was just generically a good card to be able to get rid of different characters on the field for just for Dawn, and especially in Boa, when you're reutilizing Dawn like Gorgon Sisters, like Ran, it can really make the cost of Sables essentially nothing because you're reutilizing that, attaching it to the different characters. I really liked Sables in the Boa deck, and personally, if I was going to play Boa in OP14, I would play that card. But kind of moving on away from Boa, but still staying on that removing 7 cost, especially because so many decks are being introduced into the format. That means the play rates of other decks like Emu decrease, right? We saw a lot of removal cards not be present within the format because of Emu having protection effect, right, of all of those guys. If 30% of the room is Emu, removal cards like Red Rock, stuff like that, just aren't as good. But we've started to see starter deck Doflamingo be played a lot more regularly in ace decks. I think that personally this can be a card in both Boa and Ace. It hasn't moved into the Boa deck yet, but talking about Sengoku earlier and the 7 Warlords of the Sea package, that Doflamingo could be a nice card for it. I don't know. If you're looking like you need more 7,000 power bodies, but I don't really think you do because you have the Boss Monster Boa, you have Kuma. But anyways, back to Ace. Ace can utilize that card very, very well, especially in this meta because of stuff like Dracul Mihawk, right? That 7-cost Shanks is such a good card and forces decks to really respond to its power. Not only being able to every single turn to rest a body potentially on your field, which could be a blocker like Marco or something like that, but also that minus 1,000 power on your whole board can make it very difficult to be able to swing into different bodies. Another card that we saw a little bit out in the West that I do want to give a quick little shout out to is Sogeking. Sogeking is a really interesting card, and I'm really curious to see if it continues to see a little bit of spice in the format after getting second place at one of the late OP13 regionals. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a broken card and that you have to have it in the deck, but being able to remove a body but also draw 2, trash 2 can be really good in like not only setting up your hand but remove a little bit on your opponent's side of the field, especially when it can't be Jozu'd back to hand. Speaking of purple Doflamingo though, like I mentioned earlier, purple Doflamingo I have said and I believe is a viable deck within the format. It's one of the top decks of the format. I will say though, its play rate might be a little bit low except for obviously top players because it's a very difficult deck to play. There's a lot of minute decisions and interactions, especially with your leader effect, that you have to think about. Especially if you saw my stream the other day playing in the Chinos Cup. I did a lot of learning in that stream. If you want to play purple Doflamingo, there's a set of cards that we've had previously in other sets that you're going to want to grab. One being the Sugar Searcher. Your deck will run the engine of searches of Sugar and Dellinger, and sometimes as well the 1-cost event. It's a long name. It's something about like laughing at the family. I can't remember the exact name, but those 3, Sugar and that 1-cost Searcher event, are the ones that are repeated that are in the deck. Sugar is mandatory in the deck, I think. I think the 1-cost laughing at the family event is kind of more of a fringe card that some people play, some people don't. I don't know which was correct in the testing right now, but if you don't have that card, you can build around it. Some of the other cards that we see more people play than not is 5-cost Rosinante. If you've been playing for the format a little bit, you probably have this card, right? Stuff like UP Luffy plays this or has played it in the past to be able to restand Dawn to use for your different effects. Also has the potential to draw cards. It's also great to play off of 8-cost Doflamingo, also from OP10. Now, probably has been less popular in the format previously than the 5-cost Rosinante. This is an essential part to the Doflamingo deck because you can cheat out incredible bodies like Virgo, Monet, even a 5-cost Rosinante, as I mentioned. Also, just having that effect on opponent's attack to rest 1 Dawn to ramp 1 Dawn actually makes it so in the late stages of the game, if your board is 5-cost Rosie, 8-cost Doflamingo, and 10-cost Doflamingo, you're actually able to chain those 10-cost Doflamingo boss monsters in consecutive turns, which is actually super good, don't get me wrong. And if you have multiple 8-cost Doflamingos on the field, holy moly, you can even use leader effect as well. We've also started seeing more and more, and especially if you've been playing Lim, you may have this card, is Slow Beam. Slow Beam is just an incredible card to have in Don Quixote Doflamingo, and I kind of see like purple decks in general play more of this card. It's not searchable in most alt decks, but it's still like a very present card within the format, especially these archetypes, because you can just rest anything. Like just rest anything? Absolutely, I'll do that. Some other purple cards that I'll talk about that I see in not only just Doflamingo, but a lot of other purple decks in general. Usohachi, again, I've talked about Usohachi many times before, and that thing got reprinted like crazy in PRB. So if maybe you didn't want to buy Usohachis like 6 months ago, because, well, you didn't want to spend like $8 to $10 per copy of that card, and so especially because it's just a generically good staple purple card, you could see it get increased as time goes on. Something like the 9-cost Newgate in Ace, for example. The other card that I see a lot, especially frequently, is Divine Departure from OP13. Now, I know that this is a brand new card, but I'm seeing like more and more purple or half purple decks play this card. It is just proven to be a really good removal card, right? Being able to 8,000 power on anything on the board makes it so easy. Like I was doing some practice the other day and I was playing against an 8-cost Kid deck, especially when like 3-cost Tashigi comes out on the field, right? 8-cost Kid is super hard to remove. But similar to how red decks will just play like Mole Pistol, I played Divine Departure. I made Kid like a 0 power character, or whatever the stat line is for that guy. And it was so easy to remove, even with a couple blockers trying to protect the Kid. You might not come across a lot of ACOS Kid situations in the OP14 format, but just to give you an example, right? Like any boss monster kind of deal that you really need to get rid of, purple has actually a really efficient way to remove stuff. Talking about the kind of hodgepodge of stuff, but staying slightly on track with purple with UP Luffy. UP Luffy, especially when we get the ACOS Roger promo, is still a very good deck, right? We saw it win a Tokyo Championship. We also saw it win a Hong Kong Championship, which I will actually have commentary videos on my channel in the near future. So make sure to subscribe for that if you want to hear my commentaries on those games. Fascinating games, by the way, some of those. The OP01 Dracula Mihawk SR. Now, we saw it originally in the deck, but kind of fall off in the deck in OP13 when Emu blasted on the scene, right? That removal protection just nullifying the 9-cost Mihawk. It has become much more present in decks in OP14 because of the plethora of cards that it can get rid of, right? I already talked about the 7-cost Shanks in the Mihawk deck, as Mihawk has such a high play rate, at least in the East, and I think will also have a high play rate in the West. Just a really good card. And in decks like Boa Hancock forces you to take a life on KOing things, not removing them from the board by bottom decking or bouncing back to hand. So 9-cost Mihawk actually has a lot of value in UP Luffy, in my opinion, in the upcoming format. I'll talk about real quick on Emu though. It's the Losing My Edge event. I've talked about this card for a while on the channel, so you may already have it. The OP11 1-cost event, in my opinion, honestly popularized by Guan Rong, former world champion. And I think it's just a good card. Like, you don't have to play it if you don't want to, and there are definitely some scenarios of why you would play it or why you wouldn't play it, but just have a couple in your back pocket. Going on back into blue, I mentioned that Perfume Femur was such a good card, not only for Boa Hancock, but also Jinbei. We've watched a couple Jinbei games in the championships already. It's a good and aggressive deck, especially against 5,000 power leaders, which with the release of OP14, there are way more 5,000 power leaders. I've also started seeing a lot of these Jinbei lists play the OP07 2K Trafalgar Law. Now, it's not like it's really searchable in the deck, right? Because you don't run typically Sengoku, you run Arlong as your searcher, and last time I checked, Trafalgar Law is not a fishman. But as a good utility 2K, you can actually minimize your opponent's hand, and you have such aggressive draw in the deck in general that sometimes you just find it, right? Like, you'll just draw into it. If you're a big fan of Trafalgar Law and you're a big fan of Jelly Beans' list, right, that actually did pretty well at a recent event, I would grab OP02 Makino. Makino is actually a really, really cool card, especially if you want to play Trafalgar Law on release before rotation hits, and is so cheap, right? Like, it's not really a card that's utilized anymore compared to when OP01 Zoro was running around, Trafalgar Law was running around. Like, mono red decks are not necessarily at their high point right now, but Makino can be utilized within that deck because I've seen a lot of Trafalgar Laws not only play the 1-drop Luffy, right, the searcher of the deck, also that Basil Hawkins, another searcher within the deck, but also Killer, the 1-drop that I didn't think would really be useful in the deck, but has actually seen a lot of attention in a lot of the lists that I've been posting on, like Eggman events from like flagship wins, tournament finishes at the CESs, etc. I've also got on here Lilith. Now, Lilith has made much more noise in the last week or so, especially if you watch the Chinos Cup, the purple yellow croc that won, I'm pretty sure was running a playset of Liliths. Especially with stuff like a Nell or Vegapunk on the horizon, I maybe think it would be a good idea to pick up some Liliths. I've also seen a couple Boa Hancocks play it. I don't think that's the searcher you need in the deck, although is very good, right? I can't deny that because you find all your trigger cards, which in Boa, there's a lot. But I don't know, I think about Lilith. Also kind of talk about the Gecko Moria because I know Abster and Renee have been pumping it like crazy, and a lot of people, even like Ikai's video on his like first look at OP14 meta for Western players, a lot of people have talked about how Gecko is an underrated deck and could see a lot more popularity than what we've seen in the East. And so if you're someone like my friend Ruben who wants to play Gecko Moria in OP14, please make sure that you have PRB Geckos, Sindris, that little 1-drop, and a couple copies of Dr. Hogback. That's like generally most consistently the cards that I've seen in the Gecko list that we've already had. There are some people that play the 2K 4-cost SR Perona, and I think that's a good card. You can play it, but not as many lists as I thought I would see have that card. So I don't know if it's totally correct. I haven't tested Gecko. Going in some of the Dracula Mihawk cards though, for those of you Dracula Mihawk green enjoyers, OP10 Tashigi. I think OP10 Tashigi is just a good card in general, especially if you're green with protection, especially because I've already talked about some of these removal decks, especially with 7-cost Shanks. If you're worried about stuff like the 7-cost Shanks being removed immediately after you play it down on the field, well, 3-cost Tashigi could actually be so helpful, especially because Dracula Mihawk doesn't really have any 3-cost plays that they do, right? Typically what they do on like the odd curve on like 3 or 4 is they're playing like extra coffin boats or extra searchers that they didn't play in their first turn of the game. I would also recommend getting the OP7 Bonnie, right? The stun Bonnie as I call it, or the 5-cost Seeker or Blocker Bonnie from OP12, I believe it was. Those are cards that I've seen very often in Dracula Mihawk lists, and especially if you want to run the Supernova version, you definitely want those cards, especially because Bonnie in general, right? We saw Fidelio TCG get top 4 at that Japan Championship with Bonnie. Bonnie is still a good deck, and Dracula Mihawk utilizing some of those pieces pretty consistently too. Like even if you're not running a Supernova version, I have still seen Dracula Mihawks play those different Bonnies, even if the counts are real low, like 2 each or something like that. Sometimes they're more in full counts and sometimes they're tech cards. Law and Beppo, it's a little bit late for that, but it is a 4 of in like every single Dracula Mihawk list. It is the most consistent boss monster that I see in the deck that has come from previous sets. So Law and Beppo, incredible card. Great card. Definitely want to play it for Dracula Mihawk and make sure you have it. Also something that I'm seeing way more often after the first 2 weeks or so of the format out east, and I'm wondering if it's going to pick up a lot more in the West, is the OP13 1-cost event. I think it's something along the lines of like, we're stronger, so we'll go all out from the very start or whatever, I don't know. I even think you should pick up copies of that card, especially because the treasure promotional packs that they had with the release of OP13 is a pretty clean like alternate art. I love that style that they do where it's like all white plus the trim of like the color of whatever that card is. I would make sure to pick those up because I don't know if it's like totally correct for Dracula Mihawk. It may be very dependent on what style of Dracula Mihawk you're trying to play, but I'm starting to see more and more people play some of these cards in the deck, right? It's not all just the Billion Trifold Trilithium, which I think is also a card you should get because that is very frequent in there. Paradise Waterfall, also a card. But if you've watched my videos before, you would know that you should already have Paradise Waterfall. But anyways, going back to the topic, I think that is a pretty good card. And then also Carrot. I have seen a decent amount of Dracula Mihawks play 5-cost Carrot. And even that video that I referenced from Kai earlier, they mentioned also in that sample deck list 5-cost Carrot, especially for different cards that are 7 or less that are so important in the game right now, right? You talk about Emu, which is all of those characters. You talk about Doflamingo as well, being able to stun something like Virgo, and even Jinbei, right? Stunning something like the Fisher Tiger, which is a strong card. Boa, stunning those characters that they spam out on the field from their triggers, right? You're not KOing them, you're just freezing them so they don't swing. I think you might want to have it in general, also because in EB04, this video isn't necessarily centered around the EB04 cards because we just got a lot of those reveals and there's still more of the set that we don't know about. So I'm not totally comfortable mentioning a lot of the EB04 cards, but especially with that new Carrot and also the Elaclaw event card, I don't know, like I think Carrot could be a meta viable deck. It's not going to be like a top 3 deck or anything like that, I feel like. But I think that you'll see a lot more Carrots, especially top in the Western format with the different events that we've got coming up into OP14. I haven't done a lot of testing, but I've seen some sample lists. I think I've watched like 1 or 2 games and I'm like, man, especially after, what is it, Super Monkey Fight TCG. I'm so sad I didn't write their name down on my sheet unfortunately. But they had the top with Carrot in that one event. I think, was it second place, top 4, top 8? Anyways, the best ever Carrot showing ever, I feel like, since its release in OP08. There's already like a good core right there, and especially if he ever releases a video of Carrot and it's a pretty good deck list, I don't know, man. Now, kind of going back to the conversation about EB04, remember that EB04 as a set is being split into OP14 and OP15 for us out in the West. The purple, green, and blue cards will be in OP14's release here in the next month, but red, yellow, and black is being released in OP15 out in April. And especially because we don't know the full set list yet, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not overly comfortable trying to see what cards are super viable, right? Especially because like the red, yellow, and black cards, right? There's been a lot of noise about the yellow Borsalino, which, to be fair, is a very good card. But a lot of people are talking about it like in Enel. And in the East, I think Enel could be a little bit formidable. Like, I mean, it could come back up a little bit. But in the West, when we get Enel in OP15, rotation will hit. And so then Enel loses the Capone Beige, loses 8-cost Katakuri, the 9-cost Yamato. And so like rotation, I don't necessarily know how that is really going to affect a lot of decks, and I'm not comfortable making a market watch video on those cards. I don't want to make you panic buy something, right? Because your money is valuable. And especially with some of the cards like in Starter Deck 29 that are also releasing, like I don't know if Vegapunk is going to be viable enough to build, but I think if you want to play Vegapunk after Starter Deck 29 and OP14's release, I think it could be in a really cool position as a fun, viable deck to play. And then like maybe Odin and Foxy as well. I'm not convinced that like those cards made those two decks specifically super viable, although those cards did give a boost to the deck, and I will later on my channel, probably later this week or the beginning of next week, show you deck lists of all of these new EB04 cards that we've gotten, in case you want to start prepping for those and play those day one. But like, I don't know if I'd go out and panic buy like Foxy cards or Odin cards in a sense, you know? And then because I feel like I have to be honest with you guys, I'm buying the build for OP14 Ivankoff. I have bought my buggy alts, the one-drop searcher. I have bought the Inazumas from EB. I have bought the Ivankoffs. If you see me on Twitter, I love the Ivankoff deck. I think it's fun. I don't think it's going to be like overly meta, but especially when I want to try to have fun at locals, or maybe if I'm doing like a throwaway tournament. Not a throwaway tournament, that's not the right thing. If I don't want to play something overly meta like Purple Doflamingo, I'm going to have some fun drawing some cards and playing Ivankoff, because it is a legitimate deck. Like, it is a legit fun deck. I will stand by that. And so if you want alternate arts or something for super cheap, like the Ivankoff alternate arts, the Inazuma's like $5, $6, and it's an EB01 card, which how many times have we had EB01 alts be that low? Also, Ivankoff is like a $5 alternate art, which you need play sets of both of those, in my opinion, in the deck. And the one-cost buggy as well. The one-cost buggy has definitely increased. It's like a $10 card now, but something you could grab. Anyways, that's all the cards that I got on my sheet. Again, I'll be talking about EB04 and OP14 deck list with the newly revealed EB04 cards specifically in a video in a couple days. And I've got plenty of content planned over the holidays if you need something to watch, because either you're not in school or you're off work for a little bit, hanging out and relaxing, trying to recharge, heading into the new year. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. And also, I wanted to be outside because I've been watching lots of videos, and I see Kylakai's videos outside, and he had that moment where he was like, people need to touch grass. And I realized since I've become a full-time content creator that I don't touch a lot of grass anymore. So we're recording this on my porch with my little hammock swing thing. Anyways, I'll see you guys later. This video is probably too long.